Agotavach. The Farbrengen this afternoon, the Rebbe will gesund sein, brought out that today's parsha is Parsha Shelach, which refers to the fact that Moshe sent Meraglim spies to tour Eretz Yisrael and to bring back a report what Eretz Yisrael looks like. However, the Rebbe says there is the deeper interpretation in the entire Sedre that this concept of Shlach Lecha really relates to each and every Yid. Every Yid, every Neshama comes down into this world, and every Neshama has to fulfill the Avodah in this world. And just like Rashi says regarding the Meraglim, Rashi says that Bnei Shloim told Moshe to send the Meraglim L'daitecha, which the simple meaning is that he left it up to the opinion of Moshe Rabbeinu whether to send them or not. The same when we're talking in the spiritual sense of the Meraglim, which means the Shlach that each and every neshama has here in this world, the shlichus which each and every neshama has in this world. As the Rebbe brought out later, that every neshama comes down just like the spies went to tour Eretz Yisrael. The same thing, every neshama here is searching what can be accomplished here in Olam Hazeh, and how all the nitzutzos, all the sparks of godliness that are spread all over Olam Hazeh can be elevated and escalated to a lakus. But this Avodah is also ledaitecha. In other words, here we are stressing the greatness of Avodah, which is given over to each and every Yid, and the great power that each and every Yid has, and how high he can achieve. All of this is ledaitecha. In other words, it's given over into the hands of each and every person. Each and every person has within his power. It's up to datecha of each and every Yid to fulfill this shlichus. And as we find by Matan Torah, that the Torah addresses itself to Yidden, Daber el Bnei Yisrael, Emer el Bnei Yisrael. Everything is given over to Yidden. Yidden have this koyach which the Rebbeinu has given to them. And this koyach, to be able to search out in Gashmias and spy through here in Gashmias and to see whatever can be achieved here in this world, this primarily began after Matan Torah. Because by Matan Torah, that is when the Rebbeinu broke the division of Gashmias and Ruchnias. Prior to Matan Torah, as it's explained in Chassidus at length, there was a division between Gashmias and Ruchnias. And Gashmias and Ruchnias were not able to intermingle one with another. However, by Matan Torah, the Rebbeinu broke this barrier, took away this barrier that existed between Gashmias and Ruchnias. And as the expression in Chazal goes, Va'ani hamaschil, the Rebbeinu is the one that began with this. And the pasuk goes on, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai. The Rebbeinu, who is Lamaila, came down here to Har Sinai. Ve'el Moshe Amar Alei El Elokim. And to Moshe he said later to go up El Elokim. So what does this show us right away? This right away shows us that here was the breaking and the barrier that existed between Gashmias and Ruchnias. The boundary which was between Gashmias and Ruchnias was taken away when the Rebbeinu gave Yidden the Torah. And ever since, we have this koyach that a Yid can achieve. It was given within his power. Ledaitoi from each and every Yid, that he can reach so high and so far, that he can escalate and elevate all the nitzutzes gashmias that are here in this world and bring them to a lukus. Here talking about this Va'ani hamaschil, that the Rebbeinu is the one that took away the barrier between Gashmias and Ruchnias. In other words, this came as an Isarusa de la Eila. Chassidus, we know there's Isarusa de la Eila and Isarusa de la Tata, which simple meaning means, Isarusa is an Aramaic word which is the same as in the Hebrew Hisoirerus. At times there are things that happen as an awakening from Lamaila, from the Rebbeinu. At times there are things that happen as an awakening from Mata, when we here get awakened, and that's called in Hasidic terminology Isarusa de la Tata. Many times we have an Isarusa de la Eila, which comes as a result of an Isarusa de la Tata. In other words, by us awakening ourselves here, this leads to an Hisoirerus from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which comes in response to the Isarusa de la Tata. Says the Rebbe, we can think what is greater, an Isarusa de la Eila, which is not independent on an Isarusa de la Tata, or an Isarusa de La'ela, which did come as a result from an Isarusa de Latata. And the Rebbe explained the difference. On one hand, we can say, in Isarusa de La'ela, which is not dependent on the Isarusa de Latata, this is an Isairas purely from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that is why it's in the format of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, believable, without any limitations. On the other hand, an Isarusa de La'ela, which comes as a result of an Isarusa de Latata, true, it is already bound to the limitations of Isarusa de Latata, but on the other hand, this may be greater and dearer by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because this comes as a result of Avodas B'nai Yisrael. In other words, this is coming as a result of the neshama coming down into its world, and the neshama's inyan in this world is to fulfill its mission in this world, its shlichus in this world, which each and every neshama was sent for, and as a result of the Isarusa de Latata from the neshama, this leads to an Isarusa de La'ela. We may say that this is yet dearer by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why? Because it's coming as a result of the Avodas Hamata of the Avodah of Yid. And this entire Avodah has to be done just like we find by Matan Torah, that between each and every dibur of the Yidden heard from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it was porcha nishmasan, the neshamas parted from them, and the Rebbeinu had to give it back to them. What does this mean? What does this indicate? That means that constantly they were going higher and higher. After hearing Anochi Hashem Elokecha, they were so excited and so overwhelmed that porcha nishmasan. Then when they heard Lo Yiyeh Lecha, they were again overly excited, to the extent that again porcha nishmasan. However, this in itself requires a bios, says the Rebbe, after hearing this great mitzvah of Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and then afterwards they hear Lo Yiyeh Lecha Elokim Acherim. Isn't Lo Yiyeh Lecha a letdown in comparison to Anochi Hashem Elokecha? In other words, here we're hearing about the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and how we have to believe in the Achdus of Hashem. Then later we are told that we should not associate with Avodah Zarah. If we have Anochi Hashem Elokecha established firmly, how is there room that we have to be cautioned with a Lo Yiyeh Lecha? So, on one hand, obviously it's going higher and higher, because each and every time it's porcha nishmasan, the porcha nishmasan, the neshama is parting because they heard something. Why does the neshama part from the guf? Because they heard something which is so overly exciting to them that it led to porcha nishmasan. On the other hand, we have to understand that it seems that the Seder, the sequence in the Aseres HaDibros, is not going from one inyan to a higher inyan, because especially when we look into the last five of the Aseres HaDibros, which are on the other side of the tablet, on the left side of the tablet. Why is it on the left? Because left, as we always know, Yat Smoil is the Yat Keyo, it's the weaker hand. So again, in other words, the Rebbe left this unanswered, but it seems that as the order of the Aseres HaDibros is going, Anochi Hashem Elokecha is something which is much more, whatever expression we may use, something which is, we may use the expression greater than the Aseres HaDibros which are discussed later. Especially the Aseres HaDibros which are discussed on the left side of the tablet, those are such which seem very simple, in fact. We know it's brought out in Svarim that even had we not been told them in Aseres HaDibros, we also would have known to them to fulfill this, to commit, not to do these things. But anyways, regardless, getting back to our inyan, what is the inyan of Shelach Lecha? The inyan of Shelach Lecha, as we discussed earlier, that this is the shlichus that each and every neshama has, and each and every neshama comes down here in this world, and this shlichus has to be fulfilled l'daitecha. In other words, it's given it's left up to the avodah of each and every yid, and each and every yid has the dayah to fulfill this mission of his. Especially also, we realize that we are now still in the month of Matan Torah, the Yachat Lisa. even though next Shabbos we will also be in the month of Matan Torah, but next Shabbos it's already how the month of Sivan has a shaykhus to the month of Tammuz, because it will be Rosh Chodesh. However, now we are purely still in the month of Matan Torah, in the month of Yachat Lisoy. And as we know regarding Matan Torah, how it's constantly stressed the greatness of number 3. And together with it, we are also in the first 40 days, of Matan Torah. What's the pshat of first 40 days? First 40 days, we are in a level where we have the shaykhs to the first luchos. After the first 40 days, when Moshe Rabbeinu came down and he broke the luchos, and then he had to go back and get another set of luchos. However, now we are still in this madrege, which has a shaykhs to the first set of luchos. And with the emes, Rabbi continued, this greatness of ruchnius and the overpowering of ruchnius in each and every yid, and Memela how a yid has the koyach to fulfill this mission of Shelach Lecha, we find it even in halacha. Famous halacha which the Rambam writes, that when a person, regarding Hilchas Gerushin, that if a person does not want to give a divorce, a certain particular case where the Chachamim, when Al Pi Halacha he is supposed to divorce, and then the Rambam uses the expression, we force him until he will say that he does want. So the question arises, if he didn't want the whole time, what is our forcing him and his screaming now that he wants, which is as a result an outcome of our forcing him? What does this help? Can we consider this Can we consider this something which he's doing willingly? So here the Rambam writes, and it's elaborated a lot in the Rebbe Sichas and Chassidus, because the true and real wish of every Yid is taka to fulfill the wish of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the true wish of every Yid is taka that his Ruchnius supersedes and stands before his Gashmius. The only thing, it's in this world, Me'olam Hazeh, with all the problems that are in this world. So therefore, it's something which has to be revealed within him. But be'emes, how is it in every Yid? In every Yid, it's in such a way that his true and inner desire is taka to fulfill the wish of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is the shlichus of every Yid, that every Yid should be a meragil in this world. Just like the meraglim which was sent by Moshe Rabbeinu. The meraglim which was sent by Moshe Rabbeinu did not succeed. They did not succeed in their mission. So first of all, everything which comes out in loy toiv, in the no good, originated in the good. The only thing is this did not hold out in the good, and it fell into loy toiv. But furthermore, we find some of the meraglim that did succeed. We find that Kalev and Yeshua, they were successful. And we also find furthermore, not only Kalev and Yeshua was successful, but as we read in today's Haftarah, where we read about the meraglim which was sent by Yeshua, and Yeshua was a disciple of Moshe Rabbeinu, and obviously his sending the meraglim came as a continuation to the sending of meraglim which was done by Moshe Rabbeinu, and his meraglim were successful meraglim. And even regarding the meraglim, which we claim they were not successful, to the extent that the Gemara says that the meraglim ein lehem chelik lo'olam haba. So it is known what Chassidus Taich is. Why don't the meraglim have a chelik in olam haba? Because they are higher than olam haba. We cannot give them olam haba as a reward because they are standing higher than olam haba. This is something which is explained in Chassidus. The Rebbe spoke about it in previous years. And this is also what the end of the Sedra is. The end of today's Parsha is with the Inyan of Parshas Tzitzis, which talks about Yitzias Mitzrayim. What is the Inyan of Yitzias Mitzrayim? How every Yid has the power of going out of all the Mitzarim Mikvulim, all of his limitations. And this comes into effect when a Yid introduces his mission, his shlichas, l'daitecha, into this world, and he goes out and above any types of limitations, until he reaches an ufaratzta, that he reaches out to all parts and to all without any interferences. And this is also what's the continuation of the Seder which we are beginning to read today by Mincha, which this is Parshas Koirach. Rashi tells us that Koirach Pike Choya. Koirach was smart. Then Rashi goes on and continues where the Torah explains Vayikach Koirach ben Yitzur ben Kahos. The Torah lists the whole yichus of Koirach. And Rashi right away tells us that the name Yisrael is not mentioned here. We go up to Yaakov, but we do not mention Yaakov. However, in Divrei Hayomim, where it is mentioned Yaakov, where Korach is mentioned again, Korach is mentioned again there, and there the pasuk does trace him back to Yaakov. Actually, Yisrael, the name of the pasuk uses Yisrael. And Rashi explains the reason for it here. That here, when Korach was doing something undesirable, Yaakov's name didn't want to be mentioned with him. So the question arises, we all know that Rashi's inyan is Pshuta Shel Mikra. When does Rashi answer a question? That is when the question arises. As long as the question has not arisen, Rashi does not answer it yet. So if so, when do we realize that there's a difference between the pasuk here and the pasuk in Divrei Hayomim? This we realize once we learn Divrei Hayomim. So Rashi should have waited till we reached Divrei Hayomim, and then Rashi would have told us, bring to our attention, look at the difference between the pasuk in Divrei Hayomim and the pasuk in Pashas Korach. That in Pashas Korach, Yaakov's name is not mentioned, as opposed to Divrei Hayomim where it is. Here we are learning Korach. The child who's learning the Chumash here is not aware yet how the pasuk lists Korach's yichas in Divrei Hayomim. So why does Rashi have to mention the entire thing? But the explanation for this is, Rashi's inyan is, besides being Pshuta Shel Mikra, Rashi's inyan is also Niflois HaTorah. The wonders of Torah are also revealed in Rashi. And here Rashi is right away telling us, Korach Bikeachaya, Korach was smart. And therefore, ultimately, what did he lead into? He led into tshuva. As we all know that the children of Korach all did tshuva. The famous Chazal, B'nei Korach mokim nizbatzer lehem b'Gehenim, a place was formed in Gehenim where they were able to rise, and that is where they did tshuva from. Memela, what is Rashi here telling us? Rashi here is indicating right away, true, Korach here is sinning, and Korach here is in a madrege where it is not suitable for Yaakov's name to be mentioned, that Korach is a descendant of Yaakov. However, you should know that there is room for tshuva, and Korach will be able to reach to a level where Korach will be the pride of Yaakov. And Rashi is telling us this right away, that right away we should know about this. Because Yid has to know the tremendous koiches that he's given. And including this, the koich of tshuva, which each and every Yid has. And with the koich of tshuva, we can reach to tremendous high places. Here the Rebbe mentioned the famous story from the Tzemach Tzedek. That the Tzemach Tzedek once mentioned that when he was young, the Alter Rebbe wanted to give him a bracha, the understanding of Torah. And he refused this bracha. Why? Because Torah, we have to toil in Torah. Torah, we have to have Yigiyah in Torah. So the Alter Rebbe will give him a bracha that he will understand Torah without Yigiyah. He refused that, he didn't want to accept it. But in later years, he realized that he made a mistake. Why? Because Torah is endless. True, he would have gotten a bracha for the understanding of Torah, which he would have been able to gain without any toil, without any yigiyah. It would have reached him through a bracha. However, this would make it possible for him to dwell into Torah yet deeper, and where he would be able to put into exercise the using of yigiyah b'Torah. However, in much, much deeper levels of Torah. And he repeated this later to Chassidim. They should know how deep Torah is, and he regretted that he did not accept this from the Alter Rebbe. So from here we see how deep Avodas Hashem is, how we can constantly go deeper and deeper in Avodas Hashem. And this is the same Tzemach Tzedek and the Rabbeim after him that were also heavily involved in the spreading of Chassidus. Nafat Samayonis, how it's known, the famous episode that there was a Kates, a year which Mashiach was expected. And that was for the year Tafrei Ches. So when Tafrei Ches came and Mashiach didn't come yet, so the Tzemach Tzedek's son, the Rebbe Marash, asked him, isn't this year a year that we're supposed to expect Mashiach? So he told him, Likutei Torah was printed this year. Tzemach Tzedek said, we had the revelation of the Likutei Torah. The first time the Likutei Torah was printed was in the year Tafrei Ches. So his son, the Rebbe Marash, the Baal HaLikatchila HaRibba, Rebbe Marash is known as the one who always said this famous saying of L'katchila Rebbe, the Rebbe always refers to it, told him, Tata, we need Mashiach in actuality, we need Mashiach v'poil. But what we see from the response of the Tzemach Tzedek is how the Tzemach Tzedek was so heavily involved in the spreading of Chassidus that to him the revelation of the Likutei Torah, the Likutei Torah was printed, this was considered a fulfillment of a Kates. The Rebbe continued that when we accept proper resolutions on this Shabbos of Parsha Shelach, and here we are on the Shabbos, as mentioned earlier, we are still in the first 40 days of Matan Torah. However, which is the first 40 days as opposed to the second 40 days, this is the Avodas HaTzadikim and Avodas Baalei Tshuva. However, now with the coming of Mashiach, which Mashiach will come right now, we will have in these first 40 days of Matan Torah, we will have both advantages. We will have side the advantage of the Avodas HaTzadikim, which is what the first 40 days of Matan Torah stands for, and together with it, we will also have the advantage of the second 40 days of Avodas HaTzadikim, which is the Avodah of Baalei Tshuva. This is the Taich Mashiach Osa La'asova Tzadikaya B'tiyufta. Mashiach will come, he will introduce that the Tzadikim will also have Avodas HaTshuva. In other words, it will be a combination of Avodas HaTzadikim and Avodas Baalei Tshuva. This is actually the expression of Tzadik Gomor. What means a whole and complete Tzadik? He has the advantage of Avodas HaTzadikim, and together with it also the advantage of Avodas Baalei Tshuva. And when Mashiach will come, and Mashiach will come immediately, while we are still in the first 40 days from Shavuos, in the first 40 days from Matan Torah, and we will have the third Beis HaMikdash, and in the third Beis HaMikdash we will have also all the revelations which were in the first Beis HaMikdash and in the second Beis HaMikdash, and we will get all this in the third Beis HaMikdash by the coming of Mashiach, take from miyad mamish immediately. The Rebbe continued again in the second Sikha regarding the inyan of Shelach, which this is the shlichus which each and every yid has, and every yid is called a shliach. And there's the shlichus that every yid is given the neshama beguf, and the goal of the shlichus is to accomplish lasis lo yizbarech, to make for the Rebishter dira betachtonim, that here in this world, this gashmi is the world, should become a dwelling place for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this gashmi is the world is becoming so durchgenommen and so permeated with getlachkeit. As we find regarding Matan Torah, the pasuk says, "Vayidaber Elokim es kol hadvarim ha'ela leimer." So there's a question that arises. Always we have in the Torah the expression leimer. Leimer is used when the Rebishter is speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu, and he's telling him to relate something to Yidden. So that's the expression leimer. You repeat it to them the same way. Same thing that I'm telling you now. However, by Matan Torah, all the Yidden were present. If all the Yidden were present by Matan Torah, what is the leimer? Everybody heard Matan Torah. So one of the explanations which is given on it is that what is the leimer? That at any given time, throughout all the years, whenever a Yid is going to sit down and learn Torah, he's going to get the response of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke when he gave Yidden the Torah. Anybody that's learning Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu koire v'sheina kenegde. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is responding and learning together with him. The Rebishter is responding to our sayings. And the Rebishter is learning Torah together with us now. And the Rebishter is learning Torah. Whenever a Yid learns Torah, this is again a revelation of Matan Torah. This is a repeat of Matan Torah. That's the Taich B'chol Yoim Yiyu Beinecha Chadoshim, Kechadoshim. That every day we have to view it as we have again received the Torah, because every day we are taka receiving the Torah. By the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is learning Torah with us, this is the same revelation which took place when the Rebishter gave Yidden the Torah. The Rebbe says there was a custom many years ago, and it would be proper that this custom should be renewed. That on a Friday afternoon, father would usually utilize the time to test his children. Say Friday afternoon, and say Shabbos afternoon, to find out where the children are up to in learning, and particularly relating to Parshas HaShavua. This would be say for boys and say for girls. Especially after the children come to shul. The children hear the reading of the Tzedra in the shul again. Tzedra is read in the shul on Shabbos. So this again gives an opportunity to be able to discuss the Parshas HaShavua with the children. And even with the girls. The girls are in the Ezras Noshe, and they do not hear well the reading of the Torah. However, when they hear the noise which comes from the shul, which this is the response on the Amen which is made, on the bracha, which every person that has an aliyah makes a bracha. And everybody answers Amen. And when a child asks, what is this Amen on? And a child is told that a bracha is being made. Excuse me. How we have received the Torah, this involves everybody. Say a boy and say a girl in the inyan of Torah, that everybody becomes closely attached to the reading of the Torah and to the inyanim which are discussed in the Torah. And the same thing regarding our inyan, which we are talking about Pasha Shelach, which is the inyan of the shlichus of each and every neshama through the Gashmiistic Gulf, how each and every neshama is touring through the land, just like the Meraglim Den. In other words, spying through, seeing what can be accomplished in Avodas Hashem. And as the Mittler Rebbe writes, that everything has to be done in a detailed way, and everything has to be thought over carefully, in the most detailed and precise way. And Avodas Hashem is to fulfill this shlichus, whether it's for harder avodah or for an easier avodah, but fulfilling this mission which each and every one of us has, lasis lo yizbarach dira b'tachtonim, to make sure that this world becomes a dwelling place for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is what we spoke earlier also regarding to the end of Parsha Shelach. The end of Parsha Shelach relates to Yetzias Mitzrayim. The union of Yetzias Mitzrayim is also something which has to do with the Gula Asida. As we know, Ki Meitzeischa Meretz Mitzrayim Arenu Niflois. And therefore, this is the proper time to accept proper resolutions. And these resolutions should be utilized to add on, to increase, to be meisif in the shlichus which each and every one of us has. And particularly regarding Limud HaTorah, as we've spoken about in the recent Farbrengens, the most important, which is something which is extremely important now, that everybody should reach out to other Yidden. And everyone should become a Magid Shia to learn Torah with other Yidden. If possible, to learn Torah with 10 Yidden, avada good. But even if it's not possible to reach out to 10 Yidden, to reach out with as many as possible. And to be meisif more and more shiurim and Torah, as we said in Pirkei Avos a few weeks ago, hemidu talmidim harbe, to put up many, many disciples. And even if it's not possible to learn with others, when a Yid learns himself, we should know he's also not alone. Because as we say in Pirkei Avos, when a Yid learns himself, the Rebbeinu comes and benches him. So when he's learning, he's really not learning alone. There are two of them. There's the Yid who is learning, and there's the Rebbeinu who is with him. But the Rebbe says furthermore, not only are there two involved when a Yid learns himself, there are three involved when a Yid learns himself. It's the Rabbeinu Shalom who's there with him, and the Torah that he's learning, and the Yid who is learning Torah. And all of them become totally associated when a Yid sits and learns Torah. And it's also an opportune and proper inyan to be meisif in the giving of tzedakah. Because by the giving of tzedakah, this is also something which Chazal tell us, that tzedakah hastens the Geulah. So to be meisif sayin Torah and sayin tzedakah. And as the Rebbe says, we know that it's spoken about previously, that Shaliach plus 10 equals Mashiach. What does this mean? As explained at previous occasions, that what is the meaning of the 10? The 10 relates to the 10 Koiches HaNefesh. And that when each and every one of us fulfills our mission properly, in other words, we involve all the 10 Koiches HaNefesh which we have in the fulfillment of our mission, this leads to it, that to the coming of Mashiach. And therefore, we should increase in our shlichus and our mission, the mission of making this world a dwelling place for our HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is something which relates to each and every Yid. From the minute he was born, as we see the Minig Yisrael, that a Minig Yisrael is that as soon as a Jewish child is born, we hang up the Shir HaMalos, which right away ties the child with Torah. And as we see also, a boy is given his name by the bris. By girls, we know the Minig Chabad, that the first Kriyas HaTorah possible, we give the child his name, her name, I'm sorry. And especially that we are the Parsha Shelach in this special year, in the year of Tavshin Nun. This will lead to the inyan of Geula, Hamitis al de Mashiach Tzidkenu, Mamesh, as the Rebbe used the expression, Teichef and Meyad, immediately Mamesh, the coming of Mashiach. The Rebbe again spoke about another sikha, a brief sikha about the importance of establishing new shiurim and Torah. And everyone should become involved as a magid shia to say shiurim for Yidden who are learning Torah. Men should say shiurim for men, women for women, children for children. And involve everyone, men, women, and children, in new shiurim of Torah. Especially that we are this year, in the special year, we're already after 40 years of the passing of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And we've given extra koiches of Leiv Lodas, Einayim Lerois, Vaznayim Lishmoya. As we spoke about last week in the mission of Pirkei Avos, that we're already at a time when Balabai is doichek. In other words, the Rebbeinu Shalom was already also rushing for the Geulah. He too wants that Gola should take an end, And we should come to Geula. And all of this should be with the coming of Mashiach. And the Rebbe kept on urging very strongly on the union of Hamidu Talmidim Harbe to see to it that we should establish more and more Shiurim of Torah. It's customary that in the weeks when we say Pirkei Avos, we relate to a Mishnah and Perek, and that is not only in the weeks between Pesach and Shavuos, but also the weeks after Shavuos, as the Alter Rebbe writes, Yesh Noyagin to recite Pirkei Avos for the entire summer. And in today's Perek, there's a Mishnah which is a quotation of Rabbi Akiva, in the third Perek. Mishnah Yud Gimel begins with Rabbi Akiva Omer, and then Mishnah Yud Dalet continues, Hu Haya Omer. He would say, who is the he? Rabbi Akiva. So first he begins, Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tzelem. Beloved is man, for he was created in the image of Almighty God. Then he goes on, Chaviv in Yisrael Shenikroim Bonim Lamokim. Beloved are the people of Israel, for they are called children of Hashem. Then he goes on, Chiba Yisera Nedas Lahem. A special love is expressed to Yidden, Shenitan Lahem Klei Chemda. That something which is dear and precious to HaKadosh Baruch Hu was given to them. In other words, the Torah. So actually, he's bringing out three different stages. There is the specialty of man, who was created in the image of God. Then there is the specialty of Yidden, Chavivin Yisrael, HaYidden Adir, that they are called Bonim Lamokim, children to their master. Then we have the specialty of Yidden, that Yidden were worthy to receive this very dear and precious thing, which is Torah. Being this is a saying of Rabbi Akiva, and here in this quotation, we have a reflection on Rabbi Akiva's life. Rabbi Akiva, it's brought in Svarim, was a descendant of Geirim, or as some say, that he himself was a Geir. And in this Mishnah, he's bringing out all three stages. First, he brings out the specialty of man. In other words, not Yidden, but just human beings. Then he continues and brings out the specialty of Yidden. However, as we know, Rabbi Akiva, in the life of Rabbi Akiva, took quite a while till he began to learn Torah. The famous story how he saw drops were creating a hole in a stone, and this had water was constantly dripping, and this had such a strong effect on him that he said if a stone can be affected by water, then it's not too late for him to sit down and learn Torah. That was the third stage in Rabbi Akiva's life. So first he brings out the greatness of man, which was the very first stage in his life before he was Zich Megaya. Then once he became a Yid, it's Chaviv in Yisrael Shenikroim Bonim Lamokim, the specialty of Yidden. And then, when he began to learn Torah, married the daughter of Kalba Savua. And Rabbi says the reason she married him was her mother excelled. She came from a house where they excelled in Achnosas Orchim. And that is why she was able to see the greatness that Rabbi Akiva will reach to. Even though she was daughter of such a wealthy person, he could have taken anybody for a son-in-law, anybody that he desired. Nonetheless, she wanted Rabbi Akiva because she saw what Rabbi Akiva, to what level Rabbi Akiva will reach to. And that is the third level which Rabbi Akiva discusses in the Mishnah. Chavivin Yisrael, the love which is expressed to Yidden, Sheniten Lahem Klei Chemda, that they receive something which is so precious, the precious article, the article of Torah. But again, the Mishnah continues. What does the Mishnah continue with? Hakol Tzofui, everything is foreseen, which is actually relates to the concept of Hashgacha Pratis. And what does Rabbi Akiva conclude with? Hakol Lefi Roiv HaMaaseh. What does everything depend on? Roiv HaMaaseh. In other words, after what we discussed, what is the Ikar Kol HaIkrim? What is the main thing what counts? The main thing what counts is Maaseh. The main thing that what counts is deed. HaMaaseh hu HaIkar. This is what Rabbi Akiva also stresses here in the Mishnah. Hakol Lefi Roiv HaMaaseh.